Welcome to the yard where faith and sports collide. I'm your host, Marcus Preciado. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, we have the lovely and talented Jefferson Drexler. Say hello to everybody, Jefferson, in podcast land.
Hey, podcast land. I will never get over the phrase podcast land. I mean, why not YouTube land? Why not, guys on their Zoom land?
Just go with it, Jefferson. It's kind of our deal, dude. Don't mess it up or question it. Podcast land, and that's where you are. You guys, thank you for joining us today. Hey, I just want to say a couple quick thank yous once again to Christian Podcast Central that helps us partner with us to make sure this happens. Also, YouTube guys, we have a lot of great content on YouTube. Not only all of our shows, but some behind the scenes and then some special things going on here at the yard, interviews that are isolated. So just check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and that way you know what's going on here at the yard. And speaking about what's going on here at the yard, today our special guest here is John Louis, who is the son of former heavyweight champ of the world, American icon, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. John, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, cool. We're going to have a great time today. As you can see, we're going to play a little golf here as we talk sports and life. In the second half of the show, we're going to talk about John's faith and his relationship with the Lord. And so just come along in this ride as we play some golf. But John, I feel you kind of have a little unfair advantage. You used to work for Callaway Golf after college, isn't that correct?
I did. I worked for Callaway for about 7 years. I used to, go to the driving range a lot, played a lot of golf. But then I had 5 kids in about 7-8 years, so I'm not golfing.
So there went your golf game, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Well, luckily I'll have a chance here. So hey, why don't we play like a competition to first 1 to 10?
Okay.
Right. We'll aim for the middle hole, and then if we have to tweak it or adjust it as we go, because I don't know if I'll even get one in, we'll just adjust it from there. So
you're an athlete.
All right, go ahead and get us started here, and then. So John, we met at San Diego State back in 1990. I got to play football at San Diego State with John Louis here, and was one of my first friends there. All right. Did not make it.
Yep.
So back in 1990, San Diego State, I get there, and one of the first guys I meet, John, was you. And share with us a little bit about your experience of playing college football and some of your great memories you had there.
The greatest memories I have, I'll talk to my friends, I'll talk to my wife or whatever, and the greatest memories that I had were actually in the locker room. And just being with all the guys and hearing everyone's funny stories and how we used to clown each other and talk about each other's moms. And I don't know if you remember this, we could talk about everyone's mom, but as soon as you talk about their grandmother, then that's when the fights would break out.
Oh yeah, and that's back in the day too. That's saying a lot, because that's back in the day when your mama was officially fighting words.
Absolutely.
Right? I remember going to school and you could say anything, but as soon as you said your mama, it was over. It was time to throw some blows.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So how did you get into football? Because one would think if your dad was heavyweight champ of the world, like an American icon, you would think that you would be inclined to box as opposed to football. How did that start, John?
Yeah, so my first love when it came to sports was basketball. So I grew up, Michael Jordan was, the guy. So I really just was enamored with basketball. So the reason I got into football is because, basketball season came after football season. So all my friends would be playing football. So I was bored, and I'm like, hey, I'll just go out and play football. And, I ended up being pretty good at it. And, I ended up getting a scholarship. So kind of basketball went out the door.
Sure.
And, I was athletic enough to play football. That's kind of how I got into it.
So you attended Point Loma High here in San Diego, correct?
I did.
And then you were defensive back, a cornerback at San Diego State?
Defensive back, cornerback, and wide receiver. I just remember in high school I never came off the field. So I played the whole game. Yeah, it was fun.
So you studied finance at San Diego State?
Yep, corporate finance at San Diego State. It was one of those majors that I really enjoyed. there weren't very many athletes in my classes, so I didn't get to have.
Oh, yes.
Get it to the hole.
By the way, we start out saying we were going to play to 10.
Yeah,
we might have to play to 1. So let's just be ready, guys, for a little adjustment. Let's bring it down to 5 now.
Okay.
And then we'll shift from there.
Yeah.
All right. So corporate finance. Yeah. You know, at State there wasn't too many business majors there, and come on, heck, burn it. All right. I was sharing with Jefferson earlier that you were a big blessing to me because I wanted to study business and they tried to talk me out of it, saying it was too difficult. And I was like, okay, maybe I can't do business. And you're like, that's nonsense, man. Get your business degree.
Oh man, I gotta get the ball to the hole. This is ridiculous.
And so by you encouraging me to stick with business, John, that helped solidify my decision. It was you and Zach Stokes, who were business majors, because most everybody else was like public administration and criminal justice.
Yep.
And as much as I always wanted to study criminal justice growing up and be a public administrator, what's public administration anyways?
I have no idea what it means.
And why was everybody taking criminal justice? Like, nobody cared about criminal justice, yet the whole team was studying criminal justice.
I don't get it. It didn't make any sense at all.
All right, here we go, guys. Here it comes. I'm calling my shot. Zoom in, Jefferson. Here it comes. Sometimes you just feel it. And right now you feel it.
Bam.
That's what I'm talking about. You know, Jordan got in the zone.
Yep.
You guys just witnessed right there me being in the zone.
In the zone. That's what I'm talking about.
You got that, right, Jefferson? All right, that might be the only one.
All right.
1-0.
All right, here we go. I gotta start making these.
All right, so you graduate with the finance degree from State, John.
Yep.
I know, before we moved there, we had so many great experiences.
We did.
Playing college football. I mean, so much laughter. I mean, when we get together with the DBs, man, the clowning that goes on and the memories that go on. But do you remember when we were in the airport and Coach Luganville
Oh my goodness.
started calling people out? Do you remember that story?
Absolutely.
Why don't you walk us through that story a little bit and kind of set the scene on there?
So, we're all college athletes. We don't have any money. When we go on trips, it was kind of standard protocol that you would take toilet paper from your hotel room.
Pillows.
Right,
because we stayed in nice hotel rooms.
Yes, real nice hotel rooms. You might take a light bulb if you like.
Perhaps a light bulb, a remote control maybe.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't have TVs, maybe when we got a TV, it would match that remote control that we stole. Maybe by chance.
Yeah. So there was always a little, taking from the hotel rooms. But this particular trip, it was, off the chain.
So this is what was going on. Is that Coach Luganville was getting calls, John, from all the hotels that we stayed at. And they were saying, do you realize how much thievery is going on with your team? So I think it was like 4 or 5 hotels in a row had called him.
I didn't realize
saying, we're missing this. So that was his plan to bust everybody who was stealing stuff. And do you remember we used to take those travel bags?
Absolutely.
And we would leave with the travel bags empty. But yet when we got on the plane, they were filled with stuff.
Absolutely.
All stuff from the hotel room.
Absolutely.
Some artwork. Artwork, Jefferson.
Y'all stole art, like some mauve painting of a horse?
Some random oceanside painting from the Hilton that you might want to put in your dorm, perhaps. Shower curtains.
Hey, but here was the one that I think really took it over the edge. Those funky shower mats that go in the shower.
So set that up though, because that's what made Luganville lose it. As do you remember what he started doing? He started calling out people.
Oh yeah.
Right. So chat about that. What happened?
So the game's over. I think we ended up losing that game, and Luganville gets a call from the hotel before.
Get in there. Get in. Oh, come on. And
so Luganville gets a call before we get on the plane, and it says, "Hey, these are the room numbers where we're missing things." So the coach just starts calling out names. Preciado, Louis, Jackson.
Okay, let me stop you right there.
Okay.
Up to that point, I had stolen something every trip. But I had like a meeting with Damon Pieri, who was always my roommate. And we had a little meeting because we would say, okay, this trip, why don't you take a couple pillows? I'll take some towels. And at the end of the trip, we'll divvy up, right? So 5-6 weeks into the season, Jefferson, I've got like 6 plush pillows and like an arrangement of terry cloth towels like you wouldn't believe. And we decided, let's not take anything this trip, not morally because we had an issue with it, because we already had too much stuff, right? And so I decided that week not to take anything.
Absolutely.
And he calls me out.
Yeah.
So pick up the story.
Okay, so
okay, hold up though. We were going to 10 at first.
Yeah.
Then 5, 3.
3.
You okay with that?
Yeah,
First one to 3.
Absolutely. So
We may need to bust out the cornhole again, man.
we are terrible.
Oh, here we go. Come on. Oh, that's it right there, baby. That
There
is
we go.
it.
There we go.
All right, 2 to 1.
Okay. So we're there. So he calls people out. Fortunately, on this trip, I didn't have anything in my bag either. But as people are coming up, their bags are like have big humps in them. And we basically fly in the day before, and then we fly out after the game. So no one's packing that much stuff.
Nope.
So you can just see people just start like looking at each other like, uh-oh. So guy after guy gets called up and they start unzipping their bags.
In the middle of the airport.
Middle of the airport.
Jefferson, this is going on.
Middle of the airport.
Yeah.
Towels. Yeah. Towels start coming out. So like everyone's like, oh yeah, we get towels all the
Yeah.
time. That's not a big deal. Toilet paper comes out.
You're like, oh, okay.
Shower curtains come out.
Alarm clocks.
Alarm clocks came out. Pictures on the wall.
But when did
coming
Coach
out.
Luganville lose it?
Yeah, when the shower mat came out from the actual shower, he goes, "These are 25 cents at the store."
He goes, you can buy these at Thrifties for 25 cents, like with mildew on it. You know those plastic one, Jeffersons, with the suction cups? Yeah. And then there was a pile, I kid you not. Oh,
2-2.
2 to 2.
Okay.
Who went first? You did?
I did.
So if I go now, I win.
You win, yeah.
All right. Jefferson, the pile was about 6 feet high of random hotel items.
Junk.
And man, that was probably, I hate to say it, but out of all the times we were on the field, we got to play. Miami was #1 in the nation. You playing at UCLA where I made my first start, and going to Hawaii, but out of all the memories, for some reason that's one of my favorite ones.
Absolutely.
Isn't that crazy? Okay, here we go. So here's the deal. It's 2. Did you? 2
2-2.
to 2.
Yep, but I went first.
So when I make this now, I win.
Yeah.
All right, this is gonna be good, John. Take this Callaway Golf. Come on. Can you feel the tension? You can feel it?
I can.
I can too.
You hear the hush of the crowd?
Just don't talk in his backswing.
Oh, come on, come.
Oh, okay.
Ah.
Let me take it home.
Okay. So pick it up from there, John. You leave state. You go into the business world.
Yep. So I work for a financial management company that represents professional athletes, and so I did that for about 3 years.
Nice. So I get this chance,
Yep.
right?
Oh,
This is it.
you get a redemption.
Well,
Yeah, I went
because
first,
we got to be fair here, man.
Okay.
You went
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
Come on, Jefferson.
Yeah. So go into the financial world. Did that for a few years. Then went over to Callaway and.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
yes.
Sudden death.
Sudden death. So
You
let's
wanna
go.
first.
Let's go closest to.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Does that count?
End the pain.
Does that count?
Okay, here we go. Yeah, so stayed there for a little bit. Then that's when I went to Callaway Golf and oh, I pulled it.
Oh gosh,
I
this is
opened
going to
the
be
door.
nice, John.
I opened the
This
door.
is going to be nice.
Okay.
Here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and sing it though, John, just so
Okay.
people know what's up. Here we go. Come on.
Oh man.
All right. I'll take the victory. All right. So you're at doing financial advising for professional athletes.
Yep. So was there for about 2 or 3 years, and then went over to Callaway Golf, which was just really enjoyable. I really enjoyed being there, being around golf, and just making good friends at the company. And then at that point, my future wife and I went on the mission field.
Yeah.
Became missionaries.
So at this point, you're young and single, and I know through this you've refocused your life and your relationship with God, which we'll talk about here in the next segment. But you guys go on a missions trip.
Absolutely.
And you come back changed. Right?
Absolutely.
And so now that starts the life of like being young, former college football player, up and coming young business guy, to your focus really being on focusing on things of God.
Absolutely.
So before we dive into that, which we will in the next segment, I want to talk a little bit about what it was like growing up the son of really an American legend. So for those of you guys who are my age and older, you certainly know who Joe Louis is. Any of you guys who are sports fans know who Joe Louis is. Anybody that's a boxing fan know who Joe Louis is. If for some reason you're on the younger side and don't know, do a little research. But Joe Louis was not only a heavyweight champ of the world, but he is literally an American icon. He is literally an American legend. He is a guy that God used to break the color barrier in a lot of ways in this nation, right? He has an iconic fight against Max Schmeling, right, who was the German heavyweight champ, and versus Joe Louis, the American heavyweight champ. And that's probably one of the first times in American history, because there was a lot of social tension, racial tension during that time that your dad had to go through. But at that time, America got behind your dad because their disdain for the Germans, right, outweighed their disdain for your dad because he was black, right? And so in that victory was maybe the first time, I don't know, I wasn't around, but was maybe the first time America kind of like galvanized behind this black American, cheering him on, and you're his son. And chat with us a little bit about just what it was like to be the son of a guy with that amount of weight in history.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is it kept me out of a lot of fights. So when I was in,
right, just because your dad was Joe Louis?
Yeah, when I was in elementary school, I mean, guys would come up to me and be like, hey, I want this or I want that. And someone would say, hey, you know who his dad is? Oh, my bad. Oh, you can have it, man. You can have it. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
So you were walking around like George Jefferson, like, anybody, what, everyone wants some?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I mean, I never had to fight as a little kid because all the kids were like, hey, you know who his dad is? So it kept me out of a lot of trouble, for sure.
I was talking to Jefferson earlier too, just kind of the juxtaposition of your childhood compared to mine, and we were roommates for a while. And I remember I was looking through a family album, and I'm just looking at pictures of me and my dad and my brother, and then me and my tios and my cousins, and eating carne asada and having fun, right? That's my family album. And then you broke out your family album, and one of the first pictures I saw was little John Louis in a suit on a couch, and on one side of you sitting down was Sammy Davis Jr., and on the other side of you sitting down on your family couch was Frank Sinatra. And like, that's your family album, hanging out with them. Did you realize what was going on at that time?
No, I was just a little kid, so I was like, who are these old people? What am I doing here?
And what's wrong with that black dude's eye?
Absolutely, yeah. Why do I have to wear a suit? Right, that's what I cared about. But I knew that something was happening because every time we go anywhere, there would be a lot of people who come around, and there'd be a lot of people who, were starstruck, and I couldn't understand it. They were just, Uncle Frank to me, Uncle Sammy, and.
Wait, did you say Uncle Frank?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, like Uncle Frank. Man, I mean, it's crazy.
Frank. I got my Uncle David and my Tío Chumo. Like, Uncle Frank Sinatra carries more weight than Tío Chumo.
Yeah,
but that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the other one was Diana Ross used to come to. So we were.
See, right, let's pause right there. You see what I'm saying? Like, and that just came casually. Oh yeah, and by the way, Diana Ross. Like, at that point, everything stops. Like, no, Diana Ross? What? Okay, finish up.
So Diana. So we lived in Las Vegas at the time. So a lot of entertainers were coming to the city or whatever. So Diana Ross was one of the ones who would come in today just on a regular basis. So we'd always go to the show, and she was actually my godmother. And they'd be like, hey, do you want to go to the show? I'm like, I'm sick of seeing Diana Ross. I don't want to see Diana Ross.
So you're arguing with your parents in your three-piece suit. I don't want to see Diana Ross anymore.
So you look back on it, you just go like, man, what a big dummy I was.
Wow, that is crazy. And I like hearing these stories, John, as I was sharing that I know you as just as John Louis, my buddy from San Diego State, both defensive backs. I will always be indebted to you because you introduced me to my wife, Tracy. I tried to pay you back and bless you as well by introducing you to your wife, Octavia.
Absolutely.
But, it's interesting when we have these conversations because, you typically aren't talking about Diana Ross and your Uncle Frank and Uncle Sammy. You're just talking about life. And one thing I really appreciate about you is your humility, and your identity is not in that you're the son of an icon, which you could have leveraged that for who knows what kind of initiatives, businesses, opportunities, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've always loved about you is that your identity is not in that. Your identity is first and foremost in that you're a child of God.
Absolutely.
Not in who your dad was, which is pretty important, but your identity is who your Heavenly Father is.
Absolutely.
And we'll get into that right now, guys. So stay tuned. We'll come back with John Louis, son of the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. Stick around and we'll hear a little bit more about his story of faith. Welcome back to the yard where faith and sports collide. I'm your host, Marcus Preciado, and now we're going to chat with our guest and a great friend of mine, John Louis, son of former heavyweight champ of the world, American boxing icon, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis, and we're going to get into faith and his relationship with God. John, thanks again for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me.
This is the part of the show. It's my favorite part, and really the most important part is where we talk about our faith. And this show's theme is where faith and sports collide.
Yep.
So let's start right there. How has faith and sports collided in your world?
I mean, the big thing is, as I look back, I'm going to be 50 here in about 4 months. Man, it's kind of weird to even say that. I know.
That means I'm going to be 50 pretty soon too.
Yeah.
So if you don't turn 50, I won't. So let's make a deal.
But when I think about sports and faith, I think about going back to San Diego State. Our DB room, we were called DB5, so we always say DB5?
DB5?
Yeah. And when I think about that room and just how many knuckleheads were in that room, but how we've all come to faith and how strong all of us are in our belief in God, it's like really that was kind of like the seed that really grew.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I think that's what makes, when we talk about like going into the airport and pulling all that stuff out, I mean, I think that you combine that with our faith, and that's what makes those memories so special.
It's funny you mentioned that because it was a room of 20, maybe, 18 to 20 guys. And I don't think at that point you would have identified anybody as someone that was living for God.
No.
But I think underneath it all, John, was somebody waiting for maybe a team leader. Because if there would have been a strong Christian in that room, I think our faith that we were kind of like hiding would have been stimulated to come out. And I think about that a lot because not only as a defensive backs, but as a team and some of the most notorious guys that that put fear in people's hearts, right?
Absolutely.
Now had the most tender heart for the Lord.
Yeah.
But I think like of all the time I've wasted in my life going, what if at that point there would have been a leader, a spiritual leader, to kind of draw that stuff out?
Absolutely.
As opposed to a decade or 2 or 3 later where what happens, a lot of like pain we had to go through to get to that point of faith.
Absolutely.
You ever think about that?
I totally do. I'm like, man, how would my life have transpired if I would have moved everything back 10 years, and I think about just all the people in that room and kind of like the impact, even a bigger impact that we could have had, by following the Lord. But sometimes, we're not the people we are today without going through some of that stuff. Yeah.
And it's cool how, like you were mentioning that story, that God's redeemed all that.
Absolutely.
Like, there's no shame in me telling you that story because that's not who I am anymore.
Absolutely.
And there's no shame, and as a matter of fact, some of the antics and things I was involved with before really living for the Lord, I thought some of those things that I would never tell my kids, you know, sins that I was involved in, behaviors that I was involved in, cheating my butt off in college, you know, and all those things, like I openly share with my kids now because there's no shame in that, because that's not me anymore.
Absolutely.
You know, and I'm glad how God has redeemed all that stuff where we can laugh about it, and I can even use it as lessons for my children. Say, don't do these mistakes Daddy did, you know, and God's made me new.
Absolutely.
You know. So at what point, you know, because in college you were a good guy, you know, you and I were good guys. You know, if there was a good guy category, we were kind of in that category, but we weren't living for the Lord. Right. So at what point did you go from good guy, I'm a Christian, to I want to live my life for God?
So, I mean, when I think about that question, I mean, I grew up going to church. So my mom was very strict about us going to church on, you know, every Sunday, and I went to a Southern Baptist church, and you know, they talk a lot about going to hell and you know, a lot of that stuff, and our pastor was missing 2 fingers. So you want to talk about the fear of the Lord, man. He'd be like, you are going to go? So, but at some point, I had to actually embrace it and not live through my parents' faith. I didn't live through my faith. So that happened probably when I was around 26, 27. I got married, and you know, the marriage didn't work out, ended up going through a divorce. And at that point, I'm like, hey, I've made all these decisions, and the decisions I'm making are not giving me the result that I want to have. And I remember back in the day going to church, and I remember how good that felt and how my life was so much better. Let me give God a chance. And that's really where it's really started taking off.
Yeah, it was similar with me, John, where kind of around the same age or stage of my life, I just kind of took inventory of, you know, what my life was about and how I evaluated my life. Like, you know, my car, my TV, girlfriends, relationships, the money made that month. And, you know, at the point, it came to the point, I was like, this is all empty.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I think of Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes, when he starts talking about life and starts saying, vanities of vanities, right? It's all vanities. Like, what doesn't matter if you get all this? It's like chasing after the wind. It's meaningless. So you commit your life to the Lord. Start living for the Lord, and kind of walk us through changes in your life and how John before that looked different than the John who made that decision.
Yeah. So when I was going to church, I was like going like, okay, I need to start going to church, and I really started going. I started going every Sunday morning, every Sunday evening, diving into the Bible and saying, okay, you know, I hear what the Bible has to say, but I want to read it for myself. So I started reading the Bible on a regular basis, started memorizing scripture and everything, and the Bible says it's living and active. So it's kind of like going like, okay, well, if this is living and it's just not something that happened in the past, how is it going to be active in my life? So as I started reading more and more about, you know, the stories of Moses and Joshua and, you know, Peter and Paul and the apostles, I'm like, man, they are living a supernatural life. And that's what I want to live. I want to have a supernatural life. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, you know, and so I was a part of that story, as we're
Absolutely.
we're more brothers than anything else.
Absolutely.
And so I remember that transition, and you know, and we do life together, right? And we've done it for a long time. And I remember just people meeting you and talking about you, and it was kind of the same theme over and over again, which is what a great guy. What a loving guy, what a successful guy, what a smart guy, what an athletic guy. Then you marry a beautiful woman, what a beautiful wife, she's amazing. Then you start having kids. Look at his daughters, aren't they beautiful, aren't they smart, right? And so I know from the outset for a while, I was like, wow, look at all the amazing things. John gave his life to the Lord, recommitted. Look at this trajectory he's on. Look at the career path he's on. But I know life took a left turn, and you came to a spot where that faith that now you were proclaiming, you really, really had to hold on to. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So in Deuteronomy 31, verses 6 and 8, it says the same thing basically over and over again. It says, be strong and courageous. And this is Moses, after the Israelites were in the promised land, Joshua's about to take them to inherit their promise. So they're about to cross over. And he's told, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid. And the Lord's saying, hey, I'm going to be with you as you go through that. I'm never going to leave you nor forsake you. So what that tells me is that before we gain our promise, there's going to be some fear attached to it. There's going to be some trials and tribulations attached to that. And my story, if you just hear my story and what I'm about to share with you, it would be heartbreaking. But there's actually redemption in it. So when I was 8, my little sister drowned. When I was 10, my dad passed away. When I was 18, my best friend passed away. When I was 20, my mom passed away. My grandmother passed away when I was 12, and the most recent death I had was our son Champ. And Champ had something called trisomy 18. So trisomy 18 is a genetic disorder that's incompatible with life. So basically, if you get trisomy 18, it's basically a death sentence. So the doctors came in and they shared the news with us, and having been on the mission field, we'd seen miracles. So, as most Christians would do, you start praying, like, hey, God, we're going to pray for a miracle.
And not only, I remember that, because I remember hearing the news, you guys sharing with us what it was about, us researching, and that your heart sinking.
Yeah.
But I also remember the experiences that you guys had in the mission field of literally seeing miracles.
Absolutely.
And I remember the position you guys took, as well as your friends were, okay, let's just pray for a miracle.
Absolutely.
Right? Our God is big, our God is good. And let's not only pray for the miracle, but let's expect that miracle.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of the environment that you guys were in emotionally, and your community at that time.
Absolutely. So we were all on one accord. And so we would go into the doctor's office, and we had total peace. Like we'd have joy going in there, and the doctors felt like something was wrong. They were like, do you guys understand that this trisomy 18, that even if your son makes it past birth, he won't make it to his first birthday? Like, do you guys understand it? And I'm like, yes, we fully understand it. So we would explain to him what he had, and just basically say, hey, we're believing God for a miracle. So during this time, and I think this is the first time I'm sharing this with you, my wife and I would constantly get the story of Lazarus, where Jesus raised him from the dead. I would get it, my wife would get it, and at first when we would get the story, we were like, we're parents, and obviously this is what we want to hear. We want to feel like God's telling us that he's going to raise Champ from the dead. We really want to believe this. But after a while, it started becoming every other day. We were just getting Lazarus.
So as you're praying for a miracle, as you're believing for a miracle, you're also getting the story of Lazarus over and over delivered to you guys from different sources and different angles of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead.
Absolutely. Wow. So the first thing that we think of is God's going to do it. So my wife's water breaks. She gives me a call. We go into the hospital. I call you. Basically our 5 closest friends. Somehow everyone's available, and you guys all showed up at the hospital. So as we're praying for my wife, her belly started to get really warm, and then like, hey, we have to rush her into emergency surgery to pull Champ out. So she goes to emergency surgery. They do the surgery on her, and Champ only lives for 8 minutes. So, and then he passes away. So after that, we were really heartbroken. I mean, as you can imagine, and as you were able to see, but we were really just like, God, we got Lazarus. We were like, a crystal clear that you gave us Lazarus, so clearly. Like, what was that? How come we gave us that? And it was a little bit confusing for a while. And about 2 months after Champ passed away, God revealed to us, we started reading the story of Lazarus. And right before Jesus raised Lazarus, what happened before that is Jesus wept. So Jesus wasn't telling us that he was going to heal Champ. He was telling us that he was meeting us and weeping with us when we lost him.
Wow.
So it was like the power.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So it's so interesting, like how our perspective on things.
Absolutely.
Because we know that's a big part of the story of Lazarus.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times we want to look at the victorious part in our thought and not look at the pain part.
Absolutely.
You know, where Jesus showed his humanity because he was understanding the pain that the family experienced.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
And he allowed us to have the peace. So during the pregnancy, we had total and complete peace. And then when we had the pain, he also provided the comfort in that pain. And today, Champ would be 8. So we just celebrated his 8th birthday on May 6th. And it's like now it's like we can actually celebrate it as opposed to it being something of despair. Because we know one day we get to see him in heaven. But it's actually a celebration. Like our daughters know who he is. They know his picture. They know the whole story. And it's really been a place of healing for our family.
Wow. You have 4 beautiful daughters.
Amazing daughters. Yeah.
Right? That are awesome, smart, beautiful, love horses. You were laughing earlier. What did you say about them, the sport that they chose? And
I'm like, of all the sports, it's like, so you want to be a good parent. You're like, hey, I want to let my kids try soccer and this and that. If they want to try horses, absolutely. But once you figure out how much something costs, you're like, man, why'd you pick horses? Couldn't you have picked
$35 for a pair of soccer cleats?
Absolutely.
Or $5,000 for a horse?
Absolutely. You're like, right.
And if they want the Nike horse,
oh yeah,
that's even more expensive. Nike's gonna come up with some horses now.
Actually,
once they heard this.
Okay. The Nike Air horses.
The Nike Air Horse. Wow, man, we're onto something there.
Yeah, I know.
You know, your story reminds me of I was sharing a message this weekend about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and there comes the point in Daniel chapter 3 where King Nebuchadnezzar created a decree with his officials because he wanted to be God and he wanted to be the utmost. And so he builds this golden statue. And then every time the music comes on, everybody in the nation of the Babylon nation needed to bow down and worship that statue. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't going to do that. And so they're watching them because they know that they're God's people, and the music comes on and they don't bow. And so now he takes them to the fiery furnace. And of course, this is a story we all know as kids of them going in furnace and them not dying. But this is a verse in chapter 3 that I love. They told King Nebuchadnezzar this, John. It reminds me of your story. They said this, look, I'm paraphrasing. Yo, man, you expect me to bow for that chump of an idol, that God, when I serve the real God? You got another thing coming, because I got the King of Kings. I have God, and we know the story that God showed himself as they were in the fiery furnace, and the furnace was so hot because they got mad at them that the people that threw them into the fire died. And then they looked in and they were counting, because these guys weren't burned up yet, and there were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but they counted 4. There was a 4th man in the fire, and that was God protecting them. But the point is this, what they told King Nebuchadnezzar was, we ain't gonna go, because our God isn't gonna save us. But there's a little part of that verse that we never really talk about, and they said this, even if he doesn't, we ain't gonna bow down. And that part of that verse, I really identify with you, where God can save, champ. God can resurrect, champ. That's what we're going to believe. And ultimately, he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just not on this side of eternity. But your attitude is, look, even if he doesn't, right?
Absolutely.
I'm still not going to bow down to your idols. And man, that's a powerful story, John. And thank you for letting me be a part of your life, a part of that story. And in closing, what would you share for the people that are listening now that really kind of are on the fence or going through a hard time of really investing their life with God? What words would you share with them?
I would say that God is worth it, and he has the best plan for your life. I mean, no matter what you're going through, he feels what you're feeling. But he also makes a way out, and he makes a way of recovery, and makes a way of healing and restoration. He's not a God of destruction, he's a God of healing and renewal and love. And it's like, by putting your faith in that God, your life will change for the better. Doesn't mean that all your problems will go away. It doesn't mean that you won't have trials, but you won't go through them alone.
And if that's you here today, and you're listening to this, and you know what, you're going through some tough times, and chances are you probably are.
Absolutely.
And maybe you're on the fence of really to fully commit to God, or kind of just not, and go the way of the world, of despair and anger and pain. I just want to encourage you, give God an opportunity, a wholehearted opportunity to give him everything you have, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your pain, your sins. And he's a loving God. It's really there to love you, to protect you, and to give you a life and life abundantly. So thanks for joining us today here on The Yard. Join us next week for another great, great episode.